The first thing I'm going to talk about today is TFL Studio. And to begin this conversation, we have to talk about the problem with today's TFL workflows. So this workflow starts with creating standards. So in order to make your desired tables and figures, you need to define your standards. What should those tables and figures look like? What's a high quality table or figure? And generally, this is done by creating templates like object settings in Phoenix Desktop, or maybe standard scripts if you're creating your figures and tables in R. There's a lot of work that goes into this step. So it requires a lot of technical expertise. And, this varies as tool preferences varies for this step among users. And because of that variation, standards can be difficult to maintain and share. So it's once you define the standard, it might be difficult to share that standard with your colleagues. And so there's a lot of challenges in this step. Once you've created your standards, you need to be able to apply them. And this is not trivial. So each study's data set might have to be reformatted slightly, even in our standardized world, to match the structure used in the original templates or scripts in order to apply that standard successfully. And so this reformatting might have to happen to match the standards. And a lot of times it's difficult to make our standards adapt to study specific differences in the data. So even if the data is formatted correctly, the content of the data set can actually change based on the study design. And that might render some of your templates or your pre-made scripts unusable. Or at the very least, they require a lot of post-processing to get that exact output that you're looking for. So if you're able to create and apply your standards, the next step is to fine tune those TFLs. So there's going to be something that you have to adjust, even if your standards are really good and you've successfully applied them. You often need to make some changes to produce that desired final output. And this can be difficult and time consuming. And sometimes you need to do complex steps to get the details exactly right. We see this a lot in tables specifically. So getting that flagging and formatting and reporting correct can require a lot of tips and tricks in whatever tool you've chosen to get your desired output. So this is definitely a challenge in this process. And finally, in order to QC review these TFLs, every single step from raw data to that final rendering needs to be reviewed. We need to be completely sure that the tables and figures are accurate. And because of this difficult workflow, relying on intermediate data sets and complex workflows, all of that makes that QC step that much harder. And so it takes more time, and it becomes, we're really reliant on that to catch any mistakes that happened upstream. And again, here we see that varied tools and skill sets can also make this difficult. If you've scripted in R, you need somebody who can review that R script. And whatever tool you're using can pose some challenges here. And so how are we going to address these challenges? Well, with TFL Studio, it's built for the way you work. We want you to be able to build publication-ready TFLs in 50% less time without compromising accuracy or compliance. So how are we going to make this happen? Well, the first thing is we're going to bring speed to your standards. So we're going to enable you to build those standard templates inside of our app, and these templates are going to be reusable and smart, and they're going to adapt to your real world needs without requiring you to do any coding. We're going to have flexible and transparent workflows. So everything that happens from source data set to that final rendering is going to be really transparent and clear to both the analyst and the QC reviewer. And so you're going to be able to get that quality output without the rigidity that you have to have in really locked down workflows. And finally, we're going to allow you to collaborate without friction. So we're going to simplify the way that you get and receive feedback. And then it's going to make onboarding a lot easier because the tools are going to be a lot more intuitive. And this is going to increase both consistency and teamwork. Just to give a little bit more clarity on how TFL Studio is going to address these workflow challenges, I've paired some of our features in TFL Studio up against the challenges. So first, creating standards. Again, we're going to be able to create in-app templates. So the same exact tool you're using to create your templates, you can apply your templates, and it's going to be easy to create and maintain these for your entire team or yourself inside of TFL Studio. And then you're going to be able to apply those standards. So you're going to define the standard data format in your dataset specifications, but you're going to be able to map into that standard with any dataset that you have. So whether there's only a tiny variation in your study data or it's really different data, you'll be able to map into that standard and still use all those same templates. This is also going to reduce the amount of maintenance that you have to do because the same template can work in a variety of situations. When you get to that step of fine tuning your tables and figures, we have our user friendly table and figure designers, as well as automations that allow you to make every edit that you need in a really clear and easy way. And our automations are centralized. I'll demonstrate this in a minute so you can get every detail right without having to do a whole bunch of repetitive work. And finally, that transparent workflow. All of your tables and figures will render from your source data. No more intermediate data sets. Anything you need to do, filter, summarize the data, you're going to do it in the designer. And so your QC reviewer won't have to go back and trace through any of the steps that you did. Everything is going to be right at the surface, clear business language, easy to review for your reviewer. Okay, so this brings me to my favorite part, which is I'm going to give you a quick TFL Studio demonstration. So I'll bring up TFL Studio. So here we are. We're inside of an analysis inside of TFL Studio, and you can kind of think of an analysis as akin to a Phoenix project file. All of the data sets and tables and figures that you need for a specific analysis or a study are right inside this bucket. I've already uploaded a couple data sets. I have both concentration time and our PK parameter data sets. And I've associated or assigned each of these data sets to a data set specification. And now I can go ahead and get started creating my TFLs. So I'm going to choose to work with my concentration time data set first, and it's been assigned to the appropriate data set specification, which is the concentration time spec. Because I've assigned it to a spec, I can use any of the templates that were built on that spec. And so that's what we see on this screen. We have a bunch of templates with descriptive names that are built on this data spec. And I can choose as many or as few of these as I would like. I'm going to choose them all for the sake of demonstration. The other thing I want to point out here is collections. So this is designed to be an organizational tool for you to create tables and figures and organize them in a task specific way. So we'll have a bunch of templates and collections seeded into the product when you buy it, but you'll also be able to build your own templates and your own specs and your own collections. So you'll be able to operate and build this universe of standards that make it really easy for when a user comes to this screen, they say, oh, I have concentration time data, or I'm analyzing a single ascending dose study. And so I'm going to use the collection with all of those tables and figure templates and make it really easy to just get everything you need for a certain report or analysis with very little effort. So now that I've selected my templates that exist, the next step is our mapping step. So my data set that I uploaded doesn't exactly match the standard. It's pretty close. A lot of these variables match, but I don't have the variable subj ID in my data set. And so on this step, I can say, well, I don't have subj ID, but I do have subject. And so I want you to use the variable subject anywhere in the templates where the standard had used subj ID. And this is what I mean when we can actually apply our standards without having to rework the data set. And so now that I've made that mapping, all of my tables and figures are ready to start, and I can simply click Create. At this point, all four of those objects are instantly created, and I can navigate to any one of them. This is like an individual concentration time figure, and we can go ahead and go directly to the summary concentration time figure. And again, just like that, all of the tables and figures that we need for this report or this analysis are generated. And they're generated based on all the save settings that were in the templates. Now, I want to show you a few things about the designers that support some of my earlier claims about it's actually going to apply and all of your data, all of your tables and figures are sourcing the source. So here I have a summary concentration time figure, right, where I have its mean plus or minus or plus standard deviation. But this is actually still sourcing the original data set. You can see the name here. I haven't done an intermediate step to create the summary. And so if I actually take that summarize by off and apply another grouping variable, you can see this looks really similar to the individual figure we were just looking at, except for it's on a log scale. And so again, all of that adjustment is done in this designer. And so when my QC reviewer comes, they know exactly what's happened to this data set, and it's really clear. Similarly, we have filters. So you can take any variable that you want to filter on. I'll filter on dose, and I'll say dose does not equal. It doesn't really matter here, but I can exclude any dose that I want. And again, when your QC reviewer comes to this set, they say, they've excluded the 400 milligram dose, and it's really clear and transparent. And I didn't have to go make an intermediate data set to achieve this result. So I'm going to delete that for now. Another thing that I want to show you is our dynamic text feature. So if I go back to this individual figure, what I didn't point out is that we're paging by analyte. So this is what I mean by smart templates. In the template, I said we're going to page, so you'll have a page for each analyte. And no matter what data set I upload, I'll get a page for each unique value in that analyte column. And so it's going to adapt. If you have one analyte, you'll have one page. If you have 5 metabolites, you'll have 6 pages because you have the parent in there. And with features like our dynamic text, if you watch me switch from page 1 to page 2, you'll notice that the y-axis label changes. So it goes from sotalol to sotalol M1. And if I go to our axis and show you the y-axis, it's this dynamic text feature which says, hey, call the values of analyte that you have on this page. And I'm also calling the units that way. So if each analyte had a different unit, the different unit would also appear on the page. And so the flexibility in these templates to give you your desired result, even though the details of the study are changing, are really going to make a difference in your ability to apply these standards. All right, so the next thing I want to show you is about that fine tuning. So if I head over to my PK parameter table, you can see there's quite a bit going on here. This is a pretty straightforward PK parameter table. The first thing I want to point out is if you look closely, when we're defining our table structure over here with our data, row IDs, etc., you'll notice there's a couple differences between the name rendered here and the name rendered in the table. So like for instance, subjects is actually subject ID. With Cmax, we have the subscripting going on here. And you didn't see me do anything to achieve that result. And how we've achieved that result is with our automations. So if I go into our automations tab, which has 4 different categories, and the first one we're going to look at is variables. And I'm going to search in this list because there's a lot here for subject. And so for each data set, I can define a rule. I can also define it for any data set in the analysis. I can say for subject, I don't want you to display subject. Please display subject ID because this is my preference. And one additional thing is this can either be user defined, so I can make a new rule, but this action type is inherited from the data spec. So you can actually save your preferred display names in the dataset specification. And so you don't actually have to do this step, right? It's already done because just like I have a standard data set, I have standard preferences. And every time I see subject, I want subject ID. Or probably a better example is every time I see Cmax, well, I actually want max subscripted. And I don't want to have to do that every time. And so in our automations, you can make these rules that apply across the different tables and figures. And you have some control, like I said, you can make it data set specific or you can make it for any data set. And so that's our preferred variable display, which we saw in action. But the other type of automation that I want to get at is displayed here. So you might notice that I have a flag here. So I have a superscript A, and that's being applied where adjusted R squared is less than 0.8. And I'll show off a bit of our collaboration here as well. There's a comment in this table saying, can you review this? Your SAP says to omit values where adjusted R squared is less than 0.8. And let's say, I see this note, and right here, they're all being included because you can see N is 4. But I go back and review my SAP, and my QC reviewer is right. I can simply go back to my flag rules here, and you can see that where that flag came from was this rule. So anywhere where adjusted R squared is less than 0.8, flag it in the table. That's how I get the superscript A. But I haven't omitted it from calculations, and I should have. And so I'm going to go ahead and select that, save it, and then when I go back and refresh this table, you'll see that now N is 2, and they've been omitted from the summary statistics. So a really easy way to collaborate and edit your TFLs and having those options like omit or not from summary statistics. We know that's part of your business process. We know it's something that we do. Sometimes we flag and omit, sometimes we flag and include. And we don't want you to have to write any sort of code to get there. And so we're building TFL Studio with all of these workflow steps in mind to give you a really clear and streamlined user experience in this application. Um, so that's what I wanted to show you in app for TFL Studio. And I'm going to get back to my presentation